Dr. Fuller, we're live, sir.
How are you today, sir?
I got to say, you're looking awful dapper today, Dr. Fuller.
Well, I try to show the respect I believe you and your audience deserve. So,
Is that Harris tweed you're wearing, sir?
yes, it is. It is.
Mm, me too. Look at this.
Look at you. Outstanding. Yeah, I've got a houndstooth tweed coat upstairs, too, but it's pretty chilly here today by South Carolina standards, so Harris tweed was demanded.
I love it. I was talking to somebody about this the other day when we were in Scotland at the beginning of the year. There was this amazing Harris tweed jacket, and I wanted it. So I went back to the shop multiple times, and it's it's on sale, so it's around $300 on sale, and it was just gorgeous. But I could not make it work, man. I'm like, if I'm going to spend that money, it's got to fit, and it just didn't quite fit.
Well, I've lost a lot of weight this year, so I've been taking slowly but surely taking different items either out of the rotation completely or down to my alterationist, and because fit is king, brother. Fit is
Well,
king.
there's a fat kid over here in Tennessee that wants any of your clothes that you can't wear anymore.
Well, we can work something out, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're working out in trade, absolutely.
But it's a pure math issue for me. Is like, is it cheaper to buy new clothes or to alter the ones I have? And in some cases,
Yeah.
it goes either way.
Mm-hmm. What was your uniform allowance like in the Bureau? Did you get a uniform allowance?
No uniform allowance. Matter of fact, funny story. First suit I got coming out of the Army was a brown two-piece, just hideous. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
So once I got in the Bureau, I said, okay, I got to dress at least a little bit better. I'm going into federal court. I'm going in front of federal judges. So I saved and scrimped because, you first got in the Bureau, you weren't getting paid much. And
Mm-hmm.
I bought a good suit. And within 6 months, I hit a patch of black ice in the parking lot in Vermont and went down and just tore the knee from. And of course, it was a lateral tear. It wasn't with the pinstripe. It was across the pinstripe. Blew my knee, bleeding all over the place. And Taylor couldn't help me. I didn't have a second pair of trousers to go with the suit. And so I asked the Bureau. I said, okay, well, I destroyed my suit at work. Do I get this reimbursed? And they're like, you're adorable. No, I said, well, then I'm done. I'm not buying good suits for the Bureau anymore. And I just started buying this, $500 off the rack.
J.C. Penney's.
Yeah. And now I had a boss that would spend $100. He'd come in and brag, I got 2 suits for $100 from J.C. Penney with socks. And I'm like, my socks cost more than your entire ensemble. Because I had like you, I struggled with, I'm wanting to dress well, right, and present myself well. But at the same time, if you're jumping into a dumpster as the new agent, looking for bank bands off a bank robbery, and you're wallowing through somebody's trash, or you're down in a sewer looking for a gun that somebody pitched or something like that, it's really tough to juxtapose those two views. I rode in a pair of Bruno Malis walking around in Dairy Barn in Vermont.
I think I've heard that story. Yeah.
Yeah. So I learned eventually dress for the occasion. And then once I got up on the hill, then I started spending money on clothes.
Well, it doesn't endear you either to the farmers when you walk up in Bruno Mali's. They're like, yeah, screw this guy, the latest swine.
Right. And I didn't, I didn't come from money, so I just thought, okay, FBI agents wear suits. I'm wearing a suit. And it took me a little while to figure out, okay, it's more like kabuki theater, right? You wear the costume that you need to wear.
That's exactly right.
So you're going to see a bank president, you're in a suit. You're going out to a dairy barn, you're in Carhartts and duck boots.
Exactly.
So it took me a while. I figured it out. I'm a slow learner, but I learned.
Oh, goodness. We got Will Parker out there. Will, I am actually underneath this amazing sweater from Scotland. I'm wearing your Freddie Merck's Gunworks shirt. So thank you so much for giving that. Derek is on from North Carolina. Johnny King is on. Says, good morning, gentlemen, from Kentucky. Our good friend Alan Kelly is on. Says, good morning, gentlemen. Coin number 1571 from Chile, Southwest Virginia. And the coin that he's referencing is the coin to become a member of our elite self-preservation community. If you want to find out becoming a member of that community or gifting that for the Christmas season, or maybe you could pick up one of Dr. Fuller's amazing books, No Safe Alternative, Empathy for the Devil, Painting Over Rust. You can see those above his left shoulder there. There are links in today's show notes to his website where you can pick up a copy, or you can get them anywhere books are sold, or you could get a copy of Rich Brown's amazing, intense memoir, on violence and varietals, which is also over Dr. Fuller's right shoulder. But check those out in the links today. Mark Hamilton is on from Ontario. Freddie Merck says, unfortunately, members of the military don't know about the tax write-offs we have. No, I certainly did not. Ted Leonard is on, coin number 1461. John Shriver is on out there in beautiful Yukon, Oklahoma. Ted says, dressed up in Mississippi depends on fishing or hunting season. Yes, it does, Ted. Well said. We've got a good show for you here today. I'm not going to belabor too much. I've got so many things I want to ask Dr. Fuller about. And I think top on the list has to be the fact that President Biden, decided to pardon his son. And it isn't just about lying on a 4473. It's the IRS case and any crimes that may have been committed against the United States government for roughly a 10-year period. And now, how many times did he say that he would not do this? And yet here we are, Dr. Fuller.
Here we are. Somebody should write this down. Politicians apparently will lie. We should take note. I think it's fair to say that very few of us are surprised that he did this. But I think we're all kind of disappointed. And it really just sort of makes it obvious that, look, we do live in a two-tiered system. Okay, we just do. Because presidents don't pardon somebody for tax cases. They don't pardon people for these little pissant gun cases. But they pardon their kids, apparently. And it's never happened before, of course. That's brand new. And I think it's, as I texted you this morning, I think it's precedent that both sides of the aisle are going to use forever.
Oh, yeah.
They're just going to use it forever.
On the way out the door, I'll pardon all my kids for anything they may or may not have done.
It was funny. I started looking at pardons when I saw this last night. And, he's only pardoned 26 people. 4 years, 26 people. Trump was 230 something. First four. I think we're going to see right out the gate. We'll see the January 6th pardons fly. Oh yeah. And I don't think anybody can complain about it now. I mean, if we're going to, pardon Hunter, then I guess we can pardon anybody. George Bush was 200, eight years in office, pardoned 200 people. How many Obama pardoned? It was over 1,900.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I was like, what? Is that a typo?
What?
Yeah, it's crazy.
God.
Yeah, and I guess I was trying to figure out why Biden didn't pardon very many people. And of course, the last month is traditionally when we'll see the dump of pardons. But I think it goes back to, a cynical man would say it went back to your point that you made a week or two ago, was that he hasn't been holding anybody accountable. So there's really nobody that's gone to jail. So why give out pardons?
All right.
Yeah, but the scary thing about this to me is not so much that he pardoned his kid. I mean, that's just, that's just an abuse of power, and that's what the Bidens do. It's open-ended. He didn't say, I'm pardoning you for the tax case and I'm pardoning you for the gun case. He said, I'm pardoning you for anything in that 10-year stretch. And of course, so there goes your laptop from hell. That's gone. There goes all the Ukrainian stuff, the Ukrainians, all the foreign mess that he's been in. China's gone. It's all out. But what happens if we find that he's been killing hookers and burying them in his basement?
He's good too, I guess. Unless the state wants to bring charges.
Right. He's golden. He's absolutely, this is crazy to me. So that tells me that he knows that there's other stuff out there. Two, he also recognizes that, he pardons these two, some witty, politically oriented right-wing prosecutor will find another thing to charge him with and go after him that way. So he's basically trying to inure his kid against sort of the Trump-esque prosecutions that we've seen over the last 4 years, the vengeance prosecutions, weaponization of the process. Because we live in a society now where the punishment isn't always necessarily the goal. The punishment is the process. You run somebody through it, and it costs them money, it costs them time, it costs them stress. And okay, maybe we convict them, maybe we don't. But let's say I'm a politically motivated prosecutor. Pick a side, doesn't matter which side. And I want to bump up my stature. I want to, for whatever reason, I want to run for higher office. I want more donations into my war chest for future campaigns. So I prosecute somebody politically for a political reason. And you can go through the last 15 years of headlines and find your own case that you like. Right wing could be left. It doesn't cost me anything, right? It's risk free to me. I'm not going to face any disbarment process. I'm not going to face any abuse of power process because it just doesn't happen. I'm not going to spend my own money, right? I'm spending taxpayers' money, and I prosecute Rich Brown for whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a win-win for me because if I win, I'm a champion of my side of the aisle because I convicted you. And look at what, here I am, and I'll paint it that I'm jousting the windmill, that I'm David with his sling, and I've taken down Goliath. And if I lose, I simply say, well, it's a rigged system. I went down swinging. I at least fought the good fight. You can script this in your basement. And so there's really no reason not to. What's the disincentive? I can't think of one. So why not do it? So, Biden has protected his son from that. Once you're pardoning him, why not? Pardon him for everything.
Does Jim get one on the way out the door?
Well, we'll see. At this point, I think
he needs to, because that's one could come back and bite him.
Yeah, and I think he, at this point, is just signing whatever they put in front of him. His cognitive abilities were slipping the last time we saw much of him. We haven't seen much of him in the last, 4 or 5 months. I mean, he's just
eating ice cream.
Eating ice cream, walking on the beach, not riding a bicycle anymore.
Dude, bad photo up.
And I guess he just left, for Angola last night?
Yeah, I saw that.
Signed it, gave a statement, got on a plane, flew to Angola. Not a huge media presence in Angola.
No, it's weird.
So I don't think he's going to get bombarded with many pressing questions on this issue.
Yeah.
And by the time he gets back, Beyonce will release a new album or something.
It really is the movie Wag the Dog. If you haven't seen Wag the Dog, please check it out. And when you watch it, don't forget this came out when the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke, it's just eerily similar. But let's welcome some folks onto the show. We got Tony on this morning. Tony says, good morning, folks, from a freezing south. Jeff says, nobody's there to pardon the big guy, though. What are your thoughts about that?
Which big guy are we talking about?
We're talking about Joe Biden.
Oh, well, yeah. First, he's got to get prosecuted. And look, we can't prosecute him, right? Because we have the new type of defense, which is he's just old. We can't prosecute him. Right?
I thought you were going to say he's got immunity from what he did as president, but those things were not done while president. His involvement in his son and his brother's shady business dealings.
Yeah. So, I mean, could he be prosecuted? Of course he can. I mean, I buckled a guy up one time for a fraud case. It was a multi-million-dollar fraud case, and he was in his mid-70s. His wife got all mad at me. I can't believe it. I'm like, hey, I didn't do this. Right now. I'm just here to pick him up.
Right.
But she was upset that he was going to jail because of his age. And I'm like, well, he's still young enough to spend the millions of dollars he stole from other people.
That's right.
I don't feel a whole lot of bad for you. So, yeah, does he get prosecuted? Could he be? Yeah, I suppose so.
I think it'd be foolish not to, because he's, our good friend Will Parker says, this will remove all incentive for Hunter to testify against Joe. So if you get Hunter and you could even get some underlings there too, because they weren't doing this shit in a vacuum. There were a lot of folks, I would imagine, on the payroll at any one of his 70-something LLCs that was engaged in what appears to be criminal activity. But I want to get to a couple other comments here. Will Parker says maybe a misdemeanor, which was exceeded the statute of limitations, will come up and can be woven into whole cloth and somehow produce 91 felonies. Michael Gentili says, if it was a malicious prosecution, he should have fired Garland. This administration is a cavalcade of bullshit. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, it's tough to call Mike wrong. I mean, look, our political system in general is my issue. The whole thing is just a mess. It's an absolute mess. And what's funny to me now is that, at least in the generations past, they had the good grace to conceal it, to spray some air freshener in the room, right? To try and be subtle about things.
Or somebody would just be suicided and we would move on.
Right. So we got that going for it. But I mean, think about how many reporters knew about JFK screwing around with his wife back then. All of them. But nobody said anything, right? Because it was just there was a D-Class A desire to keep things above board and keep things tasteful. And that's just eroded to a point now where we're like, I did not have sex with that woman. Okay. We just blatantly lie, we cheat, we steal. And now we've got, criminals in office, both convicted and non, and they just don't try to hide it anymore. Now they just say, look, here's what the rules are. I'm going to obey the rules. I'm not going to obey societal norms. And maybe that's even unfair because societal norms have slipped to a point where, okay, so let's put a felon in. Let's let this guy pardon his son at the last moment. Let's not prosecute him because he's our buddy. And we'll just say it's because he's old and incompetent. He's still competent enough to have the nuclear codes. He's still competent enough to function as the commander-in-chief. He's still competent enough to run for re-election if he chooses to, but he's not competent enough to stand trial. That just it's mind-blowing to me. It's absolutely mind-blowing to me.
So Governor Ray Blanton, who has been consistently listed as one of the top 10 most corrupt politicians in history, was a Tennessee governor. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Dr. Fuller. Back in the 70s, he was selling pardons. And the FBI had pretty much cornered him. And one of the pardons he signed that really freaked everybody out was one of his largest campaign donors. That man's son had killed his ex-wife and her new boyfriend and was rotting in Tennessee prison for life. So Governor Ray Blanton sits down to sign that pardon to let him out. And he looked up at his attorney general and said, "This takes guts." And the attorney general says, "Well, sir, some of us have more guts than brains, I guess." And as he signed that pardon, the FBI and the Tennessee attorney general and some other folks, Governor Lamar Alexander had just won and was the incoming governor. So they're like, legally, how can we pull this guy out? He's set up to sign a bunch of other pardons. And when the chairperson of the pardon committee, the female, I can't remember her name, she's like, "I'm not being a part of this, sir. I'm not." Well, then you're fired. If you're not going to be a part of it, I'll get somebody in here that will support what I'm doing. Long story short, they swore Lamar Alexander in quickly in a side room days ahead of schedule because the Tennessee Constitution didn't seem to, it was kind of vague on when you could sign the incoming governor in. I swear him in, I'm sorry. So they rush us in and he's like, "What do you mean?" It's almost like a coup, Yeah, you're no longer the governor, and the FBI has a set of bracelets for you to put on. And I know a lot about him because in Tennessee, of course, it was a big scandal, but he was also my wife's husband's my wife's husband. That's me. My wife's father's cellmate in prison. Yeah. So,
World, huh?
There's that little small world there.
Yeah, it goes on and on and on, right? We can go back hundreds of years, but the one that always comes to my mind, of course, is Chappaquiddick, right? You can't even spell Chappaquiddick anymore, but Teddy Kennedy would have been president if he could hold his liquor and drive. But he was never prosecuted.
Nope.
Never prosecuted. And I went on to serve in Congress for how long after that?
What was her name? Kopechne or something like that?
Mary Jo Kopechne.
Yeah. And who speaks for the victim and stuff like that?
Exactly.
Nobody.
Right. Mercy for the guilty is, further punishment for the innocent, for the victims. And it drives me a little bonkers that we're in such a rush to do these things, that we completely forget about the people who've been victimized. And like you said, who speaks for them?
So I bring up the Blanton case because I wonder if there's anywhere in there where if he starts, slinging out pardons like this, and it looks like he's trying to cover his tracks of any criminality, or the move that I keep waiting for him to make is he steps down last minute. Kamala gets to be the first Black woman president in history for 2 or 3 weeks. She gives a pardon to Joe, just like Ford pardoned Nixon. Do you think there's any chance we could see something like that play out?
Oh, there's certainly a chance. I mean, I don't even know that it's illegal. I'm sure it would be legally challenged. I'm sure it would go to the Supreme Court. Oh, Miss Lisa's here. All right. Straighten up, everybody.
That's right.
I think it would, somebody would legally challenge it. Somebody would take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would probably be stuck. I really think that it could be legally done. But, I think this is going to be a bit of a stain on what has otherwise been a lackluster at best presidency. If they pull that little fast maneuver, I think there will be some significant repercussions. And, maybe it'll make some people on the far left happy. There's probably, I've seen at least one pundit on the major news shows extolling the virtues of doing exactly what you said. Having Biden step down before the end of his term, swearing her in, she gets the historical check mark of being the first first female, president, first Indian descent president, and pardons him.
Yeah.
So could it be done? Yeah, I think it could. I mean, but does it stain everybody's record at that point? Yeah, and
100%.
long-term impacts. And look, there's going to be part of the Democratic Party that says, yeah, let's do that. And I think there'll be part of the Democratic Party that's like, look, no. We still have to live with the guards after the Red Cross leaves, right? So I mean, we're still running for office here. And you do that, and there'll be such a massive backlash on us in the next election that we're going to pay for this for years. So who wins that conversation? I don't know. I don't think the president at this point has the mental competency to have a strong opinion one way or the other. I just don't have faith in that anymore.
But that wouldn't it be the cherry on top of the skid marks, the historical skid mark that is the Biden administration? I mean, I can't think of a worse president. I used to be like, nobody can beat Carter, man. Come on. And then I'm like, well, Joe's like, hold my beer. Watch this.
Well, and the one thing you got to say about Jimmy Carter is at least he was an honest guy. I mean, no one's ever accused him of being, of malfeasance. And he's hands down probably the best ex-president we've ever had. I mean, he's been a great ex-president. The whole Panama Canal thing leaves a lot to be desired. And the hostages problem was, the economy. I mean, there's a lot of.
Okay, you're going to have to intellectually defend saying that he's the best ex-president. I can't wait to hear this. Are you talking about his humanitarian?
Yes, absolutely.
Running around the globe for photo ops of him building some mud hut?
Yep, exactly. I mean, look, how much money has he raised for charity? How much has he just given of himself? I'm not his favorite. He's not my favorite guy by any stretch of the imagination. But you have to admit that, how many years was he doing Habitat for Humanity and not a photo op? Yeah, I mean, I get it. There's photo ops. And look, if I was in charge of Habitat for Humanity and I had a former president driving nails, I'd photo op the hell out of that.
You bet your ass.
I'd raise money off that hand over fist. But I think the guy has a sincere belief in his religion. I think he's just a sincere person. I don't agree with him politically in a lot of areas. I think he made a lot of catastrophic mistakes that ended up costing people a lot of lives.
Yep.
But he's just not in the Biden league when it comes to criminality.
True. Yeah, I don't know of any allegations of criminal or immoral, unethical conduct with Carter. Yeah. Poor judgment, but
right. And that's just the risk you take, right? I mean, you elect these people based on their past record, and you just hope that they do well.
Let's see here. We got a lot of great comments coming in. Dr. Gordon Botson is on from a snowy Ohio. Miss Lisa says, hi. Good morning, DC. Yeah, let's switch gears to a little bit because I could go all day on this current administration, but hopefully they'll be out of here soon. Daniel Perry, man. Should he have? I think are they here in the final? Where are they at in this trial? Do you even know, Daniel Perry, what's going on up there in New York?
I do not. I don't know.
And I admit I haven't followed it closely either, but I heard he did not testify in his own defense, which I think I normally would say that's probably a good idea, but in this case, I think it may have helped the jurors to hear him explain why he opted for a rear naked choke on this person accosting people on a subway and hear it from his own mouth. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about a self-defense case where death results. I mean, Andrew Bronca can speak to this much better than I can, so he's probably the next up in your hit parade to talk to about this. But he makes the point often that, look, if it comes down to it, it's a he said, she said, and if it's a death resulting, it's probably just a he said, he said. So a big part of your defense is going to rely on your perception by the jury. Does the jury think you're honest? And putting him on the stand, it absolutely subjects him to cross-examination. And that can get pretty brutal, but you can prepare your client for that. And defense attorneys, they train at how to defend their client for that. But having him get up on the stand and say things like, I was just trying to help. I was just trying to stop this violence, and this was what I knew to do, and it stopped the violence. And hey, look, had he chosen to sat down, had he chosen to not engage in violent activity, we wouldn't have come to this unfortunate pass. The intention was not to kill. The intention was to stop. Death was an unfortunate, regrettable side effect. And if you can do that sincerely and it's, honestly present yourself to the jury, it can be very impactful. But I don't know enough about the nuances of the case, the ins and outs of the case. I don't know what the defense strategy was.
Yeah, I don't know any of that stuff. I just know the bare bones of it. And I think you're right. I mean, to me, it's one of those things. And there's so many things in life like this. It's just awful, but seemingly lawful conduct, given what he had at hand. He had some skills from his time in the Marine Corps. He utilized them, like you said, to stop the violence and save lives. And unfortunate the circumstances played out the way they did. But
Yeah.
when you look at the I think the guy had been arrested 30 or 40 times in the last year or so. Daniel Penny, of course, honorably discharged in the Marine Corps, served his country. He's going to college. He's doing the right things for the right reasons. No criminal past. It's like, and to hold him without bond and all this other stuff. It's like, this just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but it's New York, right? I mean, they're still saying, I can't breathe up there.
Mm-hmm.
They're still trying to make a big deal out of that. So I don't know. I mean, does he end up getting thrown to the wolves? And then look, even if he's found not guilty and he's cut them loose, he's been through this process.
Oh yeah.
So this has been costly in terms of treasure, time, stress, reputation. Yes, I get it. He's not dead. I understand that. So there's a difference between him and the other fellow.
But he's been sitting in a New York prison for a year or so. I'm not prison, but a jail. And that's going to change the guy. I mean, he's not coming out of this unscathed, and his life is forever disrupted. And to Jeff's point, there's been a lot of people testify in his behalf, saying that they were in fear for their lives and their safety and for the safety of their children, et cetera. So I hope that works to his advantage, right?
Yeah, you like to hope so. And it's really a sad commentary on our society now that more people want to video this sort of thing with their phones than want to get in there and help stop the violence. And of course, we're all worried, right? You see something break bad in front of you like that, the rubric it becomes not, hey, let's get him and stop this. It's like, ooh, God, I could get sued, I could get arrested. The best thing for me to do is be a good witness and video. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're an 85-year-old grandmother, I get that. But you and I sitting on a subway watching something like this happen, and we're not thinking stop the violence. We're thinking, oh man, lawsuit.
Right.
That's a problem, I think, in our society. Yeah. Is it a problem if you and I say, oh, there's a black man beating on a white man, let's all go jump the black man? Yeah, mm-hmm. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. But when you look at it just objectively and say, look, there's a violent outburst here and people are getting hurt and potentially killed. Let's stop that guy. But that's not where we are as a society anymore.
Yeah. Tony says, what happened to New York City releasing everyone without bail? There's a case of, you can look this up, a guy named Rex Petrie. Rex Petrie is a former Force Reconnaissance Marine. He was the head instructor when I went to school up in Quantico. And so I had exposure to him then years ago. He goes off. He's a contractor for years. He's a federal agent. Then he becomes an air marshal. This is a guy, no criminal record, held TSSCI clearances, et cetera. Did a lot of heavy stuff for the government and a lot of really secret capacities. And he gets hired when Baltimore, over the Freddie Gray thing, descended into chaos. And he gets hired as a security guy and like, hey, man, show up at the courthouse at this time. We're all going to meet up at 1900. We'll get the mission brief from the commander on the ground and blah, blah, blah. So he shows up there. And, of course, the courthouse is ringed security with the Baltimore police. And he's like, yeah, I'm here on behalf of Bluebird Security. I'm making up a name. And like, you got any weapons in your car? He's like, yeah, Glock 19, 2 magazines or whatever. And they're like, you're under arrest. He's like, what? And he goes before the magistrate the next day. It's a African-American female. And of course, Rex Petrie is a white guy, bald head, And she's like, you terrify me. You're exactly what we don't want in the city of Baltimore, and holds him without bail. Puts him in jail, in a Baltimore jail, holds him without bail, when, again, this guy is decorated man. He's given his life to this nation and the security of our country. And it's like, he terrifies you. What about this guy screams, I've got to hold him without bail because he showed up here to perform his duties? It's like, what do you make of that, man?
Yeah, well, that's just the society we're in, right? We're raising sheep. And I have no doubt that she was afraid of him. He looked scary.
Right.
I remember when I was in grad school, I would come to my classes after work. So I'd show up in a suit, after having just left the office. And I'm in class one day, and I've got my leg folded over my other leg, and they're talking about something. And a lady sitting next to me in the middle of the conversation pipes up with, "Oh my God, is that a gun?" Because she saw my ankle gun.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at her, and the professor knew who I was and knew what I did, but no one else did. And I looked at her, and she looks genuinely terrified. And I said, "Yes, ma'am. It matches the one on my hip." Mm-hmm. And then the professor jumps in and says, "Oh, why don't you tell everybody?" I was like, "Well, I really didn't want to, but okay." So I said, I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I just come from work. The next time I saw the professor, he's like, "Hey, a couple people have said they're really uncomfortable with you having a gun in the classroom." And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "I understand that." And he was kind of intimating that, I should do something about it. And my response then was, "I get it. I absolutely understand. That makes some people very nervous." I said, and so they should absolutely feel free to avail themselves of the add drop process. I will not be offended.
Mm-hmm.
They should feel free to drop the class and go on with what. And he's looking at me like, "Wait, what? No, what?" I said, "If something goes sideways, who do you want in that classroom?"
Exactly.
In this case you just discussed, if something goes sideways, who do you want there?
Mm-hmm.
Him. If something goes bad, you call a man with a gun.
Right.
Or a woman with a gun. I'm not trying to be sexist.
Yeah. No, we've talked about that. It always, anybody that's anti-gun, that's the litmus test for me. It's like, okay, you don't want to have a gun in your home. I respect that. You don't like that. However, what would happen if somebody was kicking in your door? I'll call the police. Very well. Do you want them to show up with a bouquet of flowers or a firearm to deal with this person? Of course, the firearm. Okay, great. So we don't have a problem with the firearm. We have a problem with the person possessing the firearm. And in your case, you don't want to possess it, but you want it to be in the right hands, aka Dr. T.C. Fuller, who's an accomplished shooter and can stop the threat. And
I appreciate that, Rich. But how many times have you had some version of the conversation where someone will say, "I'm against people having guns"? Okay, but not people like you, Rich. Just
100%.
how many times have you had that? I've had that so many times, right? And then my question then becomes, well, then who's the arbiter? Who gets to make that decision? Mm-hmm. That this guy can have a gun and that guy can't have a gun. I don't want to be the person to make that decision. In as much as, okay, your demonstrated propensity for unsanctioned criminal violence makes you unworthy of carrying a firearm. Okay, I get that. But to say, well, you can have one, you can't, but you're okay. I'm okay. Why? Because you know me? Okay, well, I appreciate that. I'm grateful that you feel that way about me, but that's really not a society-wide test that we want to apply. Because it's been tried before, right? Chicago, New York. Okay, well, you're one of us. We'll take care of you. You can have a firearm. We don't know you. You don't get a gun.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then what becomes the litmus test?
Mm-hmm.
Skin color, religion, political party, donations to my re-election campaign,
familial ties.
What tribal test are we going to institute?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the slippery slope that we all hate talking
about.
And
it is, and I'll take it a little bit further. So on average, police kill about 600 people a year, which really in a country of
nationwide
in a country of 340 million people. 600 people. Now that you could say that sounds like a lot. I would venture a guess 580 of those people needed killing right then. And there's 20 that we can parse out and go, let's look at this one again. Slow that down. Let's look at the tape again. Let's look at the witness statements. Let's look at the evidence. And we can really go to town with that. But most of those are lawful. And the 20 that are iffy, whether that's Tamir Rice or whatever, it's awful but lawful, right? I'll bring all this up to say the third leading cause of death in America, according to Johns Hopkins, is medical malpractice. Killing 250 to 400,000 Americans each and every year. And this has come to the forefront of my mind recently because my son's been in the ER twice. My dad, I'm taking him to the doctor's office this morning. He may go back to the hospital. So, and I see the conduct of these clinicians recently, and it is abhorrent. I mean, I had to really get pointed with the physician last week, and just, really put his ass to the ringer, and it's an interesting story. I'll tell you offline, but I've come to the position where here's where I'm going with this. If I'm the incoming administration, whether that be RFK Jr., I'm making healthcare providers wear body cams. I'm making them wear body cams. You're killing 250 to 400,000 Americans each and every year, and nothing's being done about it. And the things that I've seen in the hospitals of late are shockingly incompetence. Shocking. And
we go to socialized medicine, right? That'll improve things.
Well, it's like I know that's you want body cams for these guys who shoot 600 people a year, and 580 of them are probably lawful killings, whereas each and every one of those were unlawful killings. It may have been unintentional, but they didn't have to. And of course, Tony says HIPAA. Then put them in a vault somewhere, these tapes, and have an independent review board review them. I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, if you take 250, take the low end of that estimate, and it's always been the number 2, number 3 killer in the United States. Take the low end of it, 200. Say it's 200,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Colossal amount of people. Well, let's say 10% of those are just blatant criminality or bordering on criminality, blatant incompetence. Let's just say incompetence.
Right.
Still, it's 20,000 people a year. Relative to firearms death in the United States, it's a ginormous percentage. All firearms death. And then if you look at homicides, does that outnumber them? Certainly outnumbers the ones by assault weapons. So to your point, nobody's asking to outlaw doctors. Nobody's asking to outlaw cars, right? Cars kill, 40, 50,000 people a year in this country? Mm-hmm. Something. I haven't looked at the number in a while. I could be wildly off.
It's 30 to 40,000 last I saw.
But nobody's looking to outlaw cars. Firearms is an easy one to address because nobody wants to address the fact that it's not the guns, it's the social ills. It's the breakdown in families. It's the breakdown in communities. It's the sliding social norms that allow these things because those are difficult problems to solve. Mm-hmm. An easy problem to solve, a galvanizing problem if you're a politically motivated person that galvanizes both ends of the political spectrum is guns. Right? We're going to take your guns. We're going to defend your guns. Give us money. Okay. And you get money. So that's why that's out there. But, you come out and say, we're going to outlaw doctors. No one's going to get on board with that. Or we're going to make doctors wear body cameras anytime they're in dealing with a client. Well, I promise you the MD lobby is going to jump into action. The hospital lobby, the administration that has to pay for all the cameras and the storage and the parsing that out, they're going to jump in on it. I mean, it's going to be a colossal uphill fight. No one's going to do it. No one's going to do it because it's just too hard, right? We've become a nation of people that we just don't do things that are hard. We don't do things that are difficult anymore.
Well, I think the disruption that's about to come in with this next administration, which I can't wait. I've got my popcorn ready, Dr. Fuller. If we're ever going to get anything about this now, to put that in perspective, a 747 jet carries roughly 400 to like 416 passengers. And that would be if one 747 slammed into the ground every single day, 365 days a year, it's roughly 150,000 people. Now imagine 2 of those going down every single day. You think at some point an aviation expert might go, we need to look into this. There's something going on here. And again, of course, my experience this last couple weeks has been anecdotal, but the stuff that I could tell you would just blow your hair back. I mean, it's gross incompetence.
We've all heard those stories. My wife's cancer involves that story. So I can sing that song right back to you, and I'm sure that most of the viewers right now have the exact same issues. And I got to thinking about it when, I'm like, I need to see the patient's rights representative down here right now, and then I was telling him like, hey, you have cameras all over this place, pull them.
I'm telling you right now, pull them. You'll see exactly what the hell I'm talking about. So it's not like there isn't cameras in hospitals, and it isn't like they couldn't wear a body cam. Hell, they're wearing everything else. And it protects them and it protects the patients. And maybe if you make it involuntary, hey, if the doctor wears a body cam, we'll take his medical malpractice liability insurance down from some. What do they pay? It's probably $30,000 to $50,000, probably at least a year, down to something, $10,000 to $20,000, and you give them a financial incentive. Hell, I'm a good doctor. I know what the hell I'm doing. I'll wear the camera, get a reduced rate. Anyway, that's a story for another day here on Coffee with Rich. Let's talk about. I want to talk about. I'm going to read you a quote from the New York Post this morning. New York City officials are reacting to a bombshell new report by the Post that shows an alarming 58,626 migrants with felony records or facing criminal charges are freely roaming the Big Apple, with some 670,000 in total across the country. Out of the 759,218 illegal border crossers who now call the 5 boroughs home, 7.7% were either previously convicted of crimes or had criminal charges pending, according to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement data. But instead of rounding up and deporting tens of thousands of known criminals, critics say the city has rolled out the red carpet with its asylum policies, providing free lodging, money for food, and even a one-way plane ticket anywhere in the world. My God, Dr. Fuller, what the hell is going on?
I don't know. I mean, this has been going on for years. And I guess it's making somebody feel good about it. And we've discussed ad nauseum, both you and I, as well as other guests on the show. What is the desired end state? What's the goal here? Mm-hmm. And it really feels political. It feels like, hey, look, let's let a bunch of people in, and most of them will vote for our side, our party. And that'll help us redistrict. It'll help us break up some of the gerrymandering.
That's what Tammany did in New York in the 40s, 50s, 60s, if I'm correct there.
Yeah.
They did the same damn thing, didn't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely they did. And it went on for years. And it wasn't just Tammany Hall. It was all over the place. Major political parties, everybody from aldermen up to presidents. So it's a time-honored tradition. It's just a problem, I think. And, it's not like you're bringing over a couple 100,000 Irish or a couple 100,000 Scotch Irish. You're bringing in millions of people. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about the dish of M&M metaphor many times, right? Mm-hmm. So
can you explain that to those that haven't heard you elaborate on that, Dr. Fuller?
So, okay, I open up a bag of M&Ms, I pour it into a dish, and I say, look, I want you to eat some M&Ms. And there's 100 M&Ms in this dish. Some of them are laced with cyanide.
7.7%, according to this.
Okay.
Recent
7.7% of these M&Ms are laced with cyanide. How many M&Ms are you willing to eat? How many are you willing to let your kids eat? And that's what is happening here. Well, of course, the people making these decisions, the 436 people up on the hill that are making these decisions, it's no risk to them. It's not like they're going to get injured. These people, they live in very safe communities and very safe enclaves, especially since Nancy Pelosi's husband was beaten up in his doorway. Right? They're taking their own security even more seriously. They're not the ones that are getting mugged in parking lots at Walmart at 10 o'clock at night. Right? Mm-hmm. It's not happening to them. Their kids aren't getting knifed for their sneakers. But what they are doing is getting votes, getting political contributions, and getting reelected.
Yeah, a lot of them probably live across the border in Connecticut. At least that's where their kids probably go to school. So, yeah, it's a nothing burger for them.
Right. It's a non-risk, so maybe some of their staffers might have problems, but, I can replace a staffer, right? We can give another peasant to replace that guy. Mm-hmm. It's just such a cynical view. And maybe it's just because I'm frustrated with the whole process that I've become so cynical about it. But I don't think I'm alone. Mm-hmm. I think we're all kind of in that boat where we're just sick and tired of it. And I think that's what is the wave that President Trump rode into office. He's tapped into that national disgust with the way our political system works. And believe me when I say it's not just the left that's guilty of this stuff. Both are doing this stuff. Now, in the immigration debate, the left is getting potentially a lot of voters, but hey, the right is getting a lot of money, right? People like you and I are, what? Our guy says that he's going to do something about this, whether it's fix it or legalize it. I'm going to send him $20. I'm going to send him $50. I'm going to send him $1,000. I'm going to get out and vote. I'm going to vote for my guy. So both sides are benefiting from this. And we've talked about the immigration crisis before on this show. You and I have. They've been able to address it for 40 years that I've been paying attention to it, and they haven't. Right? When one side gets the presidency and both sides of the legislature, they don't fix it. The other side gets it, they don't fix it. They all crow about the need to fix it. None of them actually do. And look, it isn't just about the immigrants coming to the country causing problems for those of us who are here and making us uncomfortable and upsetting us and what have you. It's a very risky thing to immigrate into this country illegally. It is very, very hazardous, and not just for people walking across the desert, across our southern border. And if you've got to sit in a Connex box from, Shanghai across the ocean, get to Mexico, walk up the Mexican isthmus, and then cross that desert. I mean, there's an awful lot of opportunities for victimization, death, dismemberment. It's just a repetitively tragic story to allow this to go on. But again, cynical politicians are like, hey, there's money in it. Hey, there's votes in it.
Right.
So what's the new president going to do? His last policy was pretty solid. I mean, his last policy worked pretty well.
You talking about remain in Mexico or something else?
Remain in your country and apply.
Right.
And then, oh, by the way, I've already seen news reports where the Mexican president's like, yeah, I'm going to stop these convoys.
Because he was going to hurt her in her pocketbook.
Thank you.
And see, that's one of the things, when people crap on this idea of terrorists. I'm a huge fan if done correctly, but this is one of those ways. And, he's clapping back on Trudeau, and you see Trudeau with hat in hand showing up at Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. And that's what happens, when you start doing these kind of things. I mean, it's about leverage. Right. But I want to go back to the immigration issue. Do you think that we've heard a lot about the term mass deportations? Is that even possible in 2024? I mean, really, what do you think?
Is it physically possible? Sure, they could get it done. The problem is going to be the courts, right? Because every single person you buckle up is going to get an attorney, and every one of those attorneys is going to throw every block in the world to try and stop it, and slow it and slow roll it, and hope for that Gavin Newsom wins in 4 years, right? I mean, that's really what they're going to. That'll be the goal. It doesn't have to be stop it forever. You just have to stop it until another president comes in that you like. But even if you do, let's say you go out there and you start rounding up folks, you send home 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. That's a fraction of what's come across, right? And a lot of these people.
Can you even do that before you got a secure border? I mean, are you just wasting your time if you.
And I think he can clamp it back down to pre-Biden administration days pretty quickly. Simply by telling Customs and Border Patrol, hey, do your job.
Right.
Go back to doing your job again. Because they spent the last 4 years throwing pencils at the ceiling.
Yeah, and handing out water bottles to those that cross the desert,
right,
barely alive, right?
Right. And that's tough, too. I mean, I have friends that do that job, and they go out there and they find kids, they find women, they find pregnant women dead out in the desert. I mean, you've humped in the desert before. You know what that's like.
Yeah.
And that's when you're at the height of your, athletic ability in your early 20s, when you've trained to hike it, and you have a massive logistical train making sure that you have clean socks and water and whatnot. Yeah. And it's still a beast.
Oh my God.
Doing it in flip-flops when you're 8 months pregnant is probably a little bit more difficult.
That's funny you say that, because I was telling me and my wife were talking about that. I said, one of the hardest things I ever did, it was somebody had that great idea, like we were doing the training for the invasion in the middle of the desert. They created this giant multi-grid square box for us to do live fire in, and it was called like Thunder Ranch or Thunder Range, or like, hey, we're going to hump back. So we start off at night, and we've got all full combat load, and I'm carrying more weight than I've ever carried in my life. And the war kicked off so fast, we didn't have enough boots. It's like, you can go get whatever boots you want. So I ended up getting a pair of Israeli commando boots, which were great, but I wear size 11. They only had size 12. So my boots don't fit good. They're not broken in, Dr. Fuller. You see where this is going.
I see where this is going.
And I'm humping. You remember the Saudi Arabian sand is like a powder. It's not like sand like you and I would think of here in the States. And it's no aluminum out, no MBGs, and we're just humping and humping and humping and humping, and you don't know where the end is. And I say that because that's probably like these poor migrants, man. I didn't know when this thing was going to end, and I didn't know, like, damn, are we just going to die out here?
Right.
I was so grateful when that damn hump came to an end, but yeah, it's a horrible thing. If you really are humanitarian, you don't want these people going through that, right?
You don't. You really don't. And it's a problem in so many different levels, and it just needs to stop. And it's solvable. And like you, I've been to plenty of third world countries. I understand the need to get out of these places, the burning desire to say, look, I can't have my kids grow up here. Let me suffer this indignity now so they have a better life. I get that. I absolutely understand that. But there's a system. There's a way to do it. And that's how it should be done. And, people say, well, their own country is so terrible, so horrible. Well, maybe if your best and brightest didn't leave and tried to fix the problem, and really put some effort into it, then maybe you're in a better position, because this is a lifeboat for a lot of these people. I get that, but you can't overload a lifeboat, right?
Can we talk about that briefly? Because I made this point 2 years ago on the show, and that is the legal immigration that we allow to come in from sub-Saharan Africa is an intellectual drain on that entire continent, because we pick the best and the brightest to come over, right? So we're getting all those that have higher education. If they got a bachelor's, master's, PhD, please come in. And if you look at the percentage of people in sub-Saharan Africa that actually have a bachelor's degree or higher, it is minuscule. And then you look at the cohort of those that we allow in, and it's like 70 or 80% with higher education. So, I mean, we're hurting those developing countries by sucking in their best and brightest. So this is such a hard problem to solve. And I asked you this, I think I phrased the question wrong, because your point was, you said, I asked you, can it be accomplished? You goes, well, yeah, it can. And I think your point is, to what cost? And I think that was the true question I was going to ask you, Dr. Fuller. And that is, can we do it without ripping the country apart? I mean, we've seen the mayor of Denver come out and say, basically, over my dead body, you're not going to do this. And I can't imagine that, you talked about lawyers, everybody getting a lawyer, but what about people just tearing families apart? And I'm not talking about the migrant families, which is going to happen. I'm talking about American families who see this as a grave injustice. Can it be accomplished without any kind of social disruption?
No, of course not. There'll be massive pain. There'll be massive pain. I mean, look at California, for example, where I grew up. The Chicano population out there is massive. And, for years, my stepmother's mother lived with us, and she was illegal, spoke hardly any English, taught me a lot of Spanish, made fantastic tortillas. I'm surprised I wasn't 400 pounds by the time I got out of middle school, because she was such an incredible cook. Well, you come in and you deport her at 65, that's going to have a significant impact, right? It's going to tear that family apart. And, are they going to just let her go, or are they going to start hiding her? Are they going to shuffle her around, her 13 children that she had? Yeah, I can see that. And that's just one minor example. But you're talking about millions of people all over the country. Are there some that no one will care if they leave? Absolutely. Can you drain out the felons? Yeah, sure. But there are a bunch of them that have come over that are hardworking, honest, well-intentioned people, right? You've seen them in the construction industry there that you're running. I've seen them here in my community. You cannot fault their work ethic. You cannot fault their desire to improve themselves, right? They just did it illegally. And
right.
So how do you separate that wheat from that chaff in a fair fashion? I don't know. The best way to do it is to stop it in its own country and figure it out from there and come up with a solid plan going forward. And I get it. That's a hard policy decision to make, right? That's a difficult policy to write.
Mm-hmm.
But the difficulty of the effort and the attempt should not be a bar to us even trying.
Right.
It's too important. It's simply too important to ignore, right? Because you're talking about lives, not just the lives of the people on the far end, but the people on this end too, right? I mean, we just talked last show about the the illegal alien that fought with that young lady for 18 minutes and killed her, right? And that's an extreme example, but anybody you let in here, it's an impact. And it's impactful. And, you made a point earlier about it's about leverage. It's about the president leveraging these people and getting them to do what he wants them to do. And what he wants them to do, ostensibly, is what's in the best interest of this country. And it's always funny to me because we always think of the United States as a world power, as the superpower in the world. And that always kind of defaults to a military perspective. Oh, we're the biggest kid in the block because we spend, 10 times, 20 times what anybody else spends on defense. No one ever seems to want to kick around the idea that we're also one of the biggest humanitarian nations in the world. We spend a lot of money propping up a lot of economies around this world. And I think when people get into these presidencies in these other countries like Canada and Mexico, and they see a businessman like Trump get in office who's willing to say, hey, guess what? You're going to start doing things that are a little bit more positive for the American people, or that money faucet is going to get cranked down. Well, if you're a country that's barely functioning, you're almost a failed narco state, and the United States says, hey, we're going to cut off a few $1 billion of free money you've been getting if you don't do this. That's an attention getter, right? You don't have to drop the first Mardiv on Mexico City. Okay. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is say, hey, guess what? Yeah, we're going to spend that money on our own infrastructure. And all of a sudden you go, whoa, wait a second. Okay, well, how about this? How about I do for you?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Well, now we're having a conversation. And I think that this incoming president, one, understands that very well. And two, he's willing to pull that lever. And, clearly the last 4 years, they weren't willing to pull that lever.
Can we talk about that? The instruments of national power. I've said this multiple times before, but I want to hammer it home once. The acronym is DIME: diplomacy, information and intelligence, military, and economy. It seems like we've only exercised two of those: information, intelligence, and military. And like, where the hell has Blinken been with the Ukraine? Where has he tried to, as a Secretary of State, tried to manage some of this diplomacy? Where's the economic lever? This seems like Trump is more, pulling back on the military piece and really pushing forward the diplomacy and economics, which to me, that doesn't require bloodshed.
Yeah. I mean, look, every drug dealer knows the first time is free, right? You come to your local heroin dealer, your first hit of heroin is going to be free.
Yep.
But once you're an addict, guess who controls you, right? Once he gets you hooked on his product, guess who controls you? And I think Trump understands that. I like to hope he did. And he certainly demonstrated that the last time he was in office, that he understands, look, we've been giving you money for X number of years. That's not a gift to you anymore. That you're dependent on that now, right? It's Adam Smith tells us that expenditures rise to meet income. Well, if you're getting an extra $1 billion into your economy and your GDP is only, $10 billion a year, and the U.S. is giving you $1 billion, well, geez, that's great. Well, look at all the things we can do. Yeah, but now the U.S. giveth and the U.S. can taketh away. And that frees you up to demand the conversation, right? It frees you up to say, look, you need to start making some decisions that may or may not be, crushingly devastating to you, but are more beneficial to us. We're in essence buying your cooperation. And it's so funny to me that so many presidents seem loath to pull on that lever, and it's right there. It's right there.
Yeah, I agree. And we used to pull on it. It was the lever up until 1913. Right. Got a couple of comments I want to really get to here. Will Parker says, what TC is talking about is now a solid reason why to not allow illegal immigration into this country. And case in point, I read a headline this morning that, of course, conformed to my bias, so now I got to dig in. And the headline was, Texas troopers catch smuggler who allegedly carried a 5-year-old girl across the border. So I'm like, see, this is what we're talking about. They got this 5-year-old girl and a sex trafficker, and my mind starts going into all these ugly, dark places. But if you read the rest of the story, the mother who had illegally gotten into the country, and she's now in North Carolina, she pays some smuggler in Mexico $8,000 that she found on the internet to traffic her own daughter back to her in North Carolina. So, I mean, that again speaks to what we've been talking about, and that is you got to secure that border so that stuff like this doesn't happen. I mean, that poor girl could have been, thank God she found an honest smuggler,
Right.
but
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
That little girl could have vanished along with the $8,000 and it's all gone.
Mm-hmm.
And now what? What recourse does mom have?
Right? None. And we're going to send them both out of here.
Yeah.
They've lost the money. They lost whatever they had set up here. I mean, it's tragic on all accounts, but
you got the girl, right? The girl could have disappeared anywhere in that process.
Thank God, right?
That 5-year-old could have vanished anywhere in there. And what level of desperation would you have to be at to trust your 5-year-old to be transported from somewhere in Mexico to North Carolina in the hands of, by definition, criminals?
Yeah. And $8,000 is a lot of money. I mean, and especially for someone who, had to sneak across the border. I'm sure that was her life's treasure. And this goes back to what Ted just said. Ted says the media will be showing family separation 24/7, ignoring the MS-13 being rounded up. So prepare to mentally deal with that.
Yeah. It always cracks me. Oh, families are being separated. I'm like, have you ever been arrested or around somebody?
Right.
I mean,
that's what.
By definition, look, if you take your kid with you on a criminal action, any kind of criminal activity, pick one. I don't care. And you get arrested in that criminal activity, the kid's not going in the cell with you.
Mm-mm.
Ever.
And here's what people don't understand. Like if you were cool and you cuffed up and I didn't have to fight you, then yeah, I'm going to say, okay, who can we call to come get your kid? Is there a dad out there, a stepdad? You got a brother? Who can we get here? If you're an asshole, call the state. Okay, no problem. This is a courtesy I was going to extend to you, but we can remove that courtesy and I'll just get the state here and good luck with getting your kid back.
Yeah. And it's terrible that these things happen, but it's not the decision of the executive branch. It's not the decision of the legislative branch in the moment that happens. Right? You decided to commit a crime with your child. You decided to take that chance, and you knew you were taking a chance, and it didn't work out. And honestly, if you're getting locked up in a cell with a bunch of people your age, do you really want your kid in there with you? Or would you rather have them in another room, safe, secure, well-fed, watching cartoons and playing board games with other kids?
Right.
I mean, come on. But, yeah, whatever.
Let's got a couple of things here. Of course, Ted recalls Janet Reno taking down that Colombian kid. You see the MP5 pointed in the kid's face as he's being ripped away from his family. I mean, that was just nutso. But this has been going on for a while, and of course, that was a Democrats. Tony brings up a great question. Of course, Jeff mentions the media has completely destroyed itself over the last 4 years. Yeah, it more so than that. I mean, I remember when I heard for the first time fake news. I'm like, what the hell is that? And then it was like something being lifted off my eyes, and I'm like, oh crap. But Tony's got a great point. With 47 being a lame duck, meaning he can get reelected. How may that drive policy? But I also think about the outgoing Biden administration that are going to do everything they can to pack the courts and do everything they can to make it harder for the incoming administration. We could talk about that all day, and unless you have some strong thoughts on that, I really want to get to Kash Patel. That's why I've saved that little nugget for the end. Kash Patel being the incoming FBI director. Your thoughts?
Well, I think to Tony's question real quick, it's going to impact. That and his age are both going to impact policy, something fierce. But it's not something we haven't seen before.
Right.
We just haven't. So I think who Trump is and his age are going to be much bigger factors because he just hasn't had any F's to give for a while, and he certainly doesn't have any now. So Kash Patel as the FBI director, I think that's going to be an uphill fight. I really do. I know that makes you excited. And for those who haven't, I would highly recommend you go back and watch the Sean Ryan interview of Kash Patel. It was end of September of this year.
I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty good interview.
Great interview.
Telling. I feel as though he comes across as very relaxed. He doesn't come across as being deceitful in that. I don't see him as stroking his metaphorical mustache and hiding his face behind a cloak. I think he was really he came in there in a t-shirt And
But at the same time, he's
Yeah.
being very clear. Day one, I'm going to turn the J. Edgar Hoover building into a museum for the deep state. And you and I were
That's my point, is that I think he was honest in that. I think he
correct.
came across as very honest in it. For those who don't know Cash Patel, aren't kind of aware of him, we should probably kind of hash out who he is.
Please.
This is the guy. He's young. He's only 44 years old. Yeah. Sadly, I'm at an age now where I can say only 44 years old.
The tender age of 44.
I didn't know anything when I was 44. He finished law school in 2005, so this would make a lot of your viewers feel very old. He went to Pace Law School, and I think that's up in New York. Matter of fact, I think my eldest daughter went there for freshman year. And he was a public defender down in Miami-Dade till, I guess, about 2013. So he spent about 8 years down there, both as a state public defender, and then he moved himself over to federal. So I think he's got some solid trial experience in that. You can't be a federal or a state public defender in Miami-Dade and not have a ton of experience. Now, what type of experience? That's going to be low-level criminal activity. Maybe when he got to federal court, it was a little bit different. But I distinctly recall, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, where you'll see these state prosecutors and state public defenders come into court with just a stack of files. They'll have 40 or 50 cases that they've got to knock out between 9 a.m. and lunch. And they do it. And they do it every single day. So you get a ton of experience in the courtroom, but you don't get a whole lot of depth of experience in the courtroom. And at that level, even after he's been there 7-8 years, he's not defending Osama bin Laden, right? He's not defending the high-end, really nasty criminals. He's still getting fairly low-level guys.
Can we talk about that real quick? Because for most people, they watch too many episodes of Perry Mason, and in reality, of those stack of 40, he's a deal maker, right?
Right.
There's a lot of deals going on in this thing, right? And not a lot of trials, but a lot of deal making.
Yeah, and your fate gets determined in 30 seconds. 45 seconds. It's really time to make the donuts for the prosecutors and the defenders. But it's a lot of time in the trial. It's a lot of time in the courtroom. And you get to a point, my wife did this job for a while, both as a defender and as a prosecutor. And, you get to a point where the courtroom does not scare you, right? You're very comfortable in that courtroom because you're in there every single day. So he did that for 8 years. And then he gets hired by DOJ Maine to go into the National Security Division and work as a liaison to JSOC in 2014. So my sense is that he stayed in Miami for that because.
And JSOC is who, for those that don't know?
Joint Special Operations Command. So
Delta, SEAL Team 6.
Right.
Tier 1 units.
All the real cool guy units. Orange, blue, green, all those, that sort of thing. But my sense is he probably stayed down in Florida for that. He didn't go up to DOJ Maine in DC because JSOC is down in Florida. So I think he was probably still down there, but I'm not certain. But that's 2014. It's 10 years ago. Okay. That's when he kind of goes to DOJ. Then in 2017, he becomes senior counsel to the House Intelligence Committee on counterterrorism. Okay. So it's kind of a niche on the counterterrorism, but he becomes an attorney counsel in 2017. And somewhere in there, he becomes an aide to the chair, Devin Nunes, who's from Tulare County, right? Which is back where I went to my undergrad, in Fresno. And he ends up writing, and of course, throughout all this, at this point, he's been sort of a minor functionary, right? He's in the government. He's got a government job. He's taking a government paycheck, but he's not a policy maker. He's not a mover and a shaker. He's a guy that comes to work and fetches the spoon for the guy who fetches the coffee. Mm-hmm. And then in 2018, he gets credit for being the main author on what becomes known as the Nunes Memo. And that memo makes him a kind of a hero to the right. And basically, he takes the FBI to task for maliciously going after Trump and around the Russiagate stuff. So that makes him kind of a hero. He then kind of skyrockets from there. He gets into Trump's orbit as a big fan of Trump. He becomes a friend of Devin Nunes, self-described as a friend of Devin Nunes, and has sort of gone on from there. So we're talking about 2018, so 6 years. 7 years ago, nobody knew who this guy was. 6 years ago, they figured out who he was, and now he's been sort of jumped up from there. So good for him. He's a ethnic Indian, subcontinent Indian, not American Indian, and he is very much a Trump fan. You know, if you watch that interview, and that's my main source of information on him. I've done some reading about him as well. But
have you read his book, Government Gangsters?
I haven't read it.
Okay.
So I at this point, I kind of have to read it now.
Yeah, me too. It's on my list this month.
Yeah, I'm kind of at it. But in that interview, he says that he's got 60 or 65 names in the back of that book that he names. And I bring that up because when you factor in that with his avowed loyalty to Trump, and he's very clear in this interview. He's like, look, if the president calls, I'll do what he asks. You know, any way I can help him to get reelected, I'll do. And I get that. Okay, he's politically motivated. A lot of people are. Okay, great. But then you start listening to what he's saying. You know, he talks about, I was the lead prosecutor for Benghazi. Yeah, slow your roll there, hero. Slow your roll. Okay. Now, look, is that something you say if you're a professional prosecutor looking to stay in the prosecutorial realm? Maybe.
And you know, because you were in those hearings when you were on the Hill yourself, right?
Right.
Did you see Kash Patel in the room?
I don't know. There weren't a whole lot of Indian fellows, and I was gone by 17. So by the time he was coming in, I was out the door already. Okay. But, you know, you say things like I was the lead prosecutor, and later on he also talks about I was the lead investigator on Russiagate. Those are phrases and ways of saying things that sound more like a politician than a professional prosecutor. Okay, because, you know, professional guy to stay in that professional realm, we tend to say things like I was involved. Right? Because you don't want to overstate your position, right? You won't ever hear me say that I was in charge of the FBI's investigation in Benghazi, because I was not. Right? I was the guy that, they wanted some staffer from the Hill wants to come down and watch the Benghazi surveillance videos. Okay, send them over. You know, I'll get them in here. I'll pick them up at the door. I'll get them through security, bring them in here, plop them down in a room, get them some freaking coffee, and I'll watch the videos with them. So I've watched those videos over and over and over. Right? That doesn't make me the lead investigator. When you say things like I was the lead prosecutor, I was the lead investigator, you can do that as a politician. You can say those things because we're all used to sort of that embellishment that politicians do. So I say all those things to say that he really comes across to me at this point as a political apparatchik and not as, you know, he's being put up to be the head of the FBI more as a politician and a political functionary than as a great legal mind or some sort of leader. And look, I was not a fan of Robert Mueller. I think he made a lot of catastrophic errors in his time in the FBI, but he was a combat Marine lieutenant. He was trained in leadership. He did put in a lifetime of service as an assistant United States attorney, as a United States attorney, inside the Beltway, outside the Beltway. He had experience when he took over the job, so he was qualified for the job. Louis Freeh took over the job when he was 43, my favorite director, but, you know, which is young. 43 is young. But he'd been an agent, he knew the culture, and he'd been a federal judge. So he'd left the culture. He'd been a prosecutor. So he had experience in all those realms for 20 years before he walked in there. It's going to be very easy to look at Kash Patel as a political appointee who is like a lot of Trump appointees whose loyalties are more towards President Trump than they necessarily are towards the function that they're going into, or the government they're going to. I'm not saying that is the case. What I'm saying is it's going to be very easy to see it as the case.
Well, I'm not going to push back on that. What I'm going to add to that is, if you agree with his policies in the direction that the incoming president has set forth, and this is the guy that's going to make it happen, then okay, to me it's a so facto you're going to fall in line with that. And the other thing, and I don't want to conflate the two, but I look at Milley, General Milley, when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he's pissed off at Trump because of the Lafayette Park incident, right? Which to me was much ado about nothing, but whatever. And he goes on, he writes a resignation letter, and it's just full of vitriol and hate, and he floats it to the SecDef, and the SecDef says, why don't you sit on that for a while? And while he's sitting on that, you got to be loyal to the president. If you can't do that as an officer, then you got to go. And meanwhile, he is back channeling with Pelosi and China without the president's knowledge. And to me, of course, does that rise to the level of treason? No. But my point is, that's where the disloyalty can become a problem. That's where somebody, maybe to your point, as a Milley at that point to me became a political animal, because as an officer, if you hold that office, you either give the president what he wants, or you resign and protest, and everybody gets to see it. Everybody your letter will be online as to why you refuse this to follow him, and everybody can make a judgment call from there. So I think that loyalty is probably going to be a good thing. I think Trump has been bitten before. I think the media is making a lot of hay out of, oh, he's picking loyalists. Well, no shit.
Okay. They all do.
They all do. Are you kidding me?
But here's why I bring that up. Because the last time we talked about accountability versus retribution.
Yes, sir.
All right. And I opined then, and I stand by it today, that you need to clean house, but you need to bring in somebody with at least the appearance of independence, right? Because it's going to be very easy to draw a line from president doesn't like FBI because FBI did the SOIZ, so he got a guy to come in and kick the FBI around. And it's going to be very easy to say, to poo-poo anything the man does, as putting it right into, well, it's just vengeance. All of this is political vengeance. All this is again, a weaponizing of the FBI, especially when the FBI starts doing investigations outside the FBI. If it's being run by someone who is an unapologetic political operative, I think what we have is exact same problem we had when things were flying to the left, only now it's the pendulum swung to the right. And you can get somebody like Patel that doesn't have the public image of Patel and still do what you want to do and get done what needs to be done. Because clearly, a bit of a wrecking ball needs to go through that place, at least in the higher echelons. Mm-hmm. But I think what you're going to find is that it's giving a lot of ammo to the opponents of the president, starting with the people that are going to try and make his confirmation process a misery.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there was a commandant back in 1973, commandant of the Marine Corps. His name was General Wilson. He won the Medal of Honor as a young officer during the island hopping campaign. He rises the ranks from Mississippi. He's about 6'4", tall, lean, sinewy. He's exactly what you had to picture. And he had that
Coastal Marine, right?
Yeah, and he had that old Mississippi Southern drawl. Well, he rises to the commandant, and he institutes a policy, I think in 73 or 74, called "Just Me and My Driver." And what he meant by that was he was going to clean up the Marine Corps. He's like, I'll tear it to pieces if it's just me and my driver left standing, and we'll rebuild the Marine Corps from the ashes. So this is somebody, to me, that loves the institution so much that he's willing to decimate it to save it. And that's exactly what he did. He instituted a rapid discharge program, like you catch somebody with drugs. Like back then, the Marine Corps had all these draftees. So we're going from the draftees to the AVF, the all volunteer force. And he was right to say, if you got a commander out there that's being soft on these druggies or on these race-related crimes or whatever, I'm going to shoot you in the face. You're gone.
Sure.
And so I think that I look at Patel and those like him that are incoming as just me and my driver. If it's just me and my executive protection detail, we'll build it from the ashes. And he said he's going to, and it speaks to this idea of the deep state. There was no deep cabal inside the Marine Corps that was letting this crap go rampant. But I think when the values are aligned, for example, if somebody looks at mine and your charge card this month and goes, oh, TC Fuller bought 1,000 rounds of 9mm, so did Rich. They must have colluded, and there's this secret cabal that to buy 9mm ammunition. But it's not. As our values are aligned. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does. You don't like. I sent you that blurb from George Carlin yesterday, where he talked about, look, if your goals are aligned, you don't have to be in a stated conspiracy, right? You can just be out for number one. And look, if your goals, Rich, and my goals are aligned, then we don't have to say let's collude and make this happen. We're just both striving to live our best life, and if I happen to help you in that process and you help me in that process, well, great. And I think that's what really defines our deep state problem, not some sort of back room with cloaked figures and candle
meeting at Bohemian Grove every year.
I just that's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
And look, change is uncomfortable, right? And I recognize the fact that I'm old enough and I spent my life in the Bureau and have a lot of problems with the way things are done in the Bureau. But the idea of coming in with a wrecking ball, certainly it's chilling. And you're going to need somebody that is not necessarily loyal to the organization to make those cuts, perhaps. But your point with General Wilson is he had the background. He had the time in the organization to know where the bodies are buried, to know what cuts needed to be made, to understand what the ideal was and to strive for that ideal. I think it's a stretch to say Patel is in that same category, right? I mean, if you
let's put a pin in that, because I want to push back on it just a smidge. Let's say that I have the mission and the mandate of the Marine Corps, right? And I go, let's say I put you weren't a Marine, but I give you the mission and the mandate of the Marine Corps. I think you and a staff of guys could figure it out and run the Marine Corps just fine. Because if we've gotten so far to the left or so far to the right of that mandate, it's like, man, I don't know of any other way to get this train back on track than to make some pretty drastic things, because we got the mission is this. For example, let's say the Marine Corps' mission is we want to create an expeditionary force in readiness that wins battles, because the Army wins wars, we win battles, right? And then you got, well, the Marine Corps is doing all this diversity, equity, inclusion. They're worried about climate change. They're getting rid of some of their combat arms elements that would help them win battles and this and that. You're like, guys, we're way the hell away from what we're supposed to be doing. I think that's why I'm fine with the Cash Patel, because sometimes if you're too immersed in the culture, you can't see the forest for the trees.
True. I would also caveat that by saying if I were to take over the Marine Corps tomorrow and run it with a staff and make the changes, I would be dependent upon experienced Marines to do that. Right? I mean, just to write a memo in the right format that the Marines would, to know what color crayon to use when I'm writing that memo. Right? I'd have to find somebody who was but you see what I'm saying? I have to understand the culture, or have people around me that understand the culture.
You know what I would do, Dr. Fuller? I would bring in all the FBI whistleblowers. And let's start with you guys. Well, why did you do what you did?
You can certainly do that. I mean, my problem is I know some of the whistleblowers, and we can talk more about that.
There may be some disgruntled people in there, I would imagine.
Disgruntled is a kind word in this particular context. I mean, you can find people that will tell you how to reform the FBI that aren't people that necessarily have a particular axe to grind or have something to gain by doing it. If Cash Patel is going to come in and he's going to make these changes, he doesn't know the FBI. I mean, he knows it from a little bit. You bump
the sidelines, right? The cheap seats.
Well, he was at DOJ, so he's had some experience, but he makes it very clear in this interview that we're talking about that he has problems with the FBI. He blames a lot of his inability to get things done. He knew the right thing to do and he couldn't do it because entrenched factors at the FBI, at DOJ, and in the intelligence community, which he doesn't define, stopped him from doing it. Okay, I get that, and again, it sounds great as a politician running for office, or in his case, for a guy who's trying to boost the fortunes of a politician he wants to see get office. But you know as well as I do, privates bitch about sergeants. Privates bitch about lieutenants. Privates bitch about captains and the decisions that captains made. I mean, how many times have you heard some version of, look, Steve, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You've been an officer, you just don't know, right? And that's because they have their perspective, right? And their perspective oftentimes is this tree, that tree, the other tree. It's not the whole forest. And so for him to come in at his relatively modest position at DOJ and say they're making command decisions over there that are completely off the radar. Well, that sounds great to you and I. It really does. But I have to look at it from, again, I've been an enlisted guy, I've been an officer just like you have. And there's a lot of decisions that get made at those higher levels that you simply, as a private, you just don't have the context to understand why it was made. I mean, if you're a Marine landing at Peleliu, and you're
why are we doing this again? What the hell?
You don't know what the global.
How is this a good idea?
Yeah, this is a bad idea. These Japanese everywhere. We shouldn't be here. This is stupid. God, Lieutenant, you're an idiot. Why are we on this island? Right? Does that make the private right? History debates the value of Peleliu as an invasion. Sure. But at the time, you've got a lot of high-ranking people that do see the forest, that do see the trees, and maybe not as well as that private, making the decision that, look, we're going to land on this island. And my concern is not with the idea that there's going to be a change at the Bureau, because I really think there needs to be. And I don't think you'll find a retired agent anywhere that won't say, yeah, they need to make some significant freaking changes.
Everyone I know, the Bureau says the same thing.
But the concern is that, look, you've got a political operative in there with a stated axe to grind against the FBI. I mean, he's currently involved in a lawsuit that he talks about in that interview where he's civilly suing the FBI. That's going to be a weird thing. He's going to be inside the FBI with access to every document in the FBI. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think day one he's going to pull his own file. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's going to be right. But, okay. And then if he starts making decisions on that, okay, maybe some of those decisions need to be made. For me, the problem is it's going to be very, very easy to filter anything he does through that interview. And in that interview, he's just like, I'm going to shut the building down and turn it into a model for the museum for the deep state. That sounds fantastic as a political statement. But it's
not going to happen.
It's not happening. I mean, that piece of property is valued at over $1 billion.
Yeah.
There are 10% of the FBI employees working in that building. You cannot shut it down for it.
Let's talk about that, because I think that shocked me when he said there are 7,000 FBI employees. Now, they're not all field agents. I get it. There's a lot of support staff in that building. There's technicians and people that, work at laboratories, I'm sure, within that building. But when I heard 7,000, I'm like, Jesus Christ. He says, well, what are you going to do with the 7,000 people you kick out of the building? He goes, they're cops. I'm going to send them out to the field offices and they're going to go do what they're supposed to do. But there's something to be said for the kind of creature that wants to go to the Pentagon instead of do war fighting in the Marine Corps.
Right.
You got these critters that, like, I never met anybody that worked at the Pentagon. You know why? Because once they entrench there, they freaking stay there.
It's like range control writ large, right?
Exactly, right? Yeah.
They get into range control.
Who the hell are these guys? Blackburn, who are you?
So, yeah, I mean, look, I joke that 10% of the FBI works at FBI headquarters. When you look at the agent population, it's probably about 10%. I mean, that work in that building. And look, 10% of the FBI agent population is 1,500 people, 14. I don't know what the exact agent population is anymore. But it's, the agency itself employs 35,000 people, of which 12 to 15,000 are actual gun carrying, badge carrying agents. Mm-hmm. So 1,500 of them up there I think it's too many, but you need some, right? Because look, the FBI is not an organization that investigates dogs barking at night in Boise, Idaho.
Right.
Okay. They investigate crimes that are not just all over the United States, but they're transnational. That takes a significant amount of coordination. Mm-hmm. Right? Because if I, Brick Agent T.C. Fuller, and I'm investigating half a dozen girls from Guatemala that are walking the streets at 12 years old, 14 years old, and they're being used as prostitutes, that's taking up all my bandwidth. Mm-hmm. Well, just because they're here in Charlotte doesn't mean that another dozen aren't in Texas, and another dozen aren't up in Cleveland, and another dozen aren't out in Seattle, right? Because there's people just like me doing those investigations elsewhere. But we're reporting into a central system, and somebody up above us needs to go, hey, wait a second. We got this and this and this, and oh, by the way, it comes back to this cartel. All right, that takes coordination. Now we got to coordinate with the authorities in Guatemala, and we've got to coordinate with there's a way station in Mexico that they're going through. That takes a lot of manpower and a lot of people. You got to have an FBI headquarters. You can't not have an FBI headquarters. Does it need to be in DC? We've had this conversation before. Probably not. Can you
put it in Kansas City, for God's sake? Put it somewhere in the heartland,
Yeah, Yeah,
Need to be there.
we're centrally located. I mean, it's easier to call them, right? If
Mhm.
folks in California got to wait till lunchtime before they can call DC because no one's at work,
Right.
or vice versa. DC's got to wait till lunchtime. So it takes some coordination. And can you move it? Certainly you can. Can you thin the ranks? Yes, you can. But to say something as hyperbolic as I'm going to close it down day one and turn it into a museum day two is, again, that's a political statement. That's not.
It makes a great slogan for a T-shirt.
It does. It does. It sounds great. And I mean, look how energized it's made you. You're like, yeah, let's do this.
Tear it down.
Right.
And let's go at the ATF next. But anyway,
Then we can just get rid of the ATF and we'll get rid of the IRS and we'll be okay. That's all well and good. But certain things, you got to embrace the realities. And the guy who's the director of the FBI should be that guy embracing those realities. Look, if you're going to go take over the FBI, if I was going to take over tomorrow, I'd say, look, we need to make some cultural changes. We need to, right this ship. We need to earn back public trust that has been squandered in the last decade. Okay, and these things may not be glamorous, but it's a reality of what you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. What you don't want is a guy who's so politically volatile that he's saying, I'm going to shut the place down. I'm going to throw everybody out the door. Because then not only does that put you in a position where you're not going to be able to do that day one, but you just sent a very clear message to the 30,000 people that you're about to start being their boss.
Yeah.
Right? And I can tell you from experience, the director has a lot of power, but he's going to get managed. And he's going to get in there. I mean, how many times did you take over units and you're like, oh, I'm going to clean house. I'm going to make this change. I'm going to make that change. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then, an NCO or a gunny comes up and says, all right, look. Or how many times have you had that conversation with the world changing officer that shows up? Mm-hmm. All right, sir, slow down. There's a way we got to get this done. And we can make these changes. We can do these things. However,
right.
we got to get through it.
You're restrained by this law over here and that one over there.
You can wreck the policies all you want, but there are laws involved. And,
that's right.
Look, if he wants to come in and say, I'm going to decapitate the FBI and fire all these guys. No, you're not.
You'll be found suicided somewhere. I'm just kidding.
Well, you're not going to be found suicide.
I'm joking.
For federal employees with federal employee protections.
That's right.
So you can't just come in and say, you're fired and you're fired and you're fired, right? But what you can do is say, hey, Rich, 28 years, you've been doing this a long time. I need to make some changes around here. I'm looking to promote some of my people. I'm going to need to see you retire in the next few months. If you can go ahead and do that, then that'd be great. And I'll give you a great letter of recommendation, and I'll show you at the door, and you need to start looking around. That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, a lot of people in the senior ranks of the FBI should be thinking that way. But my experience with people in the senior ranks of FBI is that there tends to be a lot of hubris there. And
no,
it's shocking. I know. I shouldn't even say senior ranks. In the FBI, period, there's a lot of hubris. Okay, I'm just going to go out on them. Not me, of course. I'm far too good to be that proud. But there's a lot of hubris there, and it gets worse as you up. And so there will be people that think, well, yeah, those other guys should retire, but not me. He'll have an uphill row to hoe. That's if he gets through confirmation, which I'm not convinced he will. He may. I mean, I think at the very least he's going to be a big battle because what's his name? Gertz.
Matt Getz.
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah.
So who's their next big battlefield?
Yeah. Yeah, this is again. It's going to be something to watch, and we'll be telling our grandkids about 2025, 2026, and the years to come. So many things, whether it's the immigration issues or what have you. We'll see how these sanctuary cities play out with the incoming administration. We're going to see who ends up taking over the FBI and what can they get done. So I'm excited.
I love his idea of ganking security clearances. I think that's a fantastic idea. Because there's
you got 50 right out of the gate to take away.
Yeah, and just say, and I don't know how much control the FBI has over taking away people's security clearances, but there's a significant amount of control they have over whether or not you get one in the first place. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Well, the other thing is with, if he gets that and Tulsi Gabbard gets the head of the is it National Intelligence Office?
DNI, Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah. So, and you have values aligned, then things could get done.
And the backing of the president, right?
Yes.
So make these decisions and do so with his imprimatur.
Yes, sir. Because I think the place that you and I completely agree on is something needs to change. Now, what that change looks like, I think you and I could debate that, but I think we're both in agreement that it's got to change, not just at the FBI, but the DOJ as an apparatus, and the DOD needs to clean house. Is Pete Hedgett going to be the right guy to do it? Hell, I don't know. Probably, maybe not. But there definitely does need to be a realignment back to where the true, what would you say, the true mission is?
Well, they certainly, at the very least, they have to manage perception better than it's been managed. They've got to get people back on the idea that, the government is not out to get you. We're not, trying to do things illegally. We're not trying to hide the ball. We're not weaponizing the apparatus of the U.S. government. So that needs help. That needs desperate help, because people, I always laugh, ever since all the president's men came out, people have been on a downhill slide in their trust for government.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at an all-time low, right? And you need reformers to come in and be perceived as reformers coming in. So I get that. But again, you got to manage perception. If you're talking about, I'm going to do all these great things, and you get in and you don't get all these great things done, there's a perception management issue that you failed.
Yeah.
So how do you fix that? You hire a consultant. That's how you fix that.
I would love to see that. If there's any way to make that happen, I might have to tweeting out to Kash Patel, bring you on board. I think that would be fantastic.
So read my book. We'll start there.
Well, that's what Ted says. Painting over rust made me think that Musk needs the help of the FBI with their tech. It's there's so many places that Doge. I look forward to seeing what they can do. And Tony says I'm worried about his pick for AG Bondi. I don't know. It's going to be interesting times. Dr. Fuller, thank you for being on here for an hour and 36 minutes, sir. Where can folks pick up your book, Painting Over Rust, Empathy for the Devil, or what's your other book?
No Safe Alternative.
No Safe Alternative. Thank you so much.
The easiest place to find them is tcfuller.com. Follow the links and you'll be off to the races. Or, your American Warriors Society folks can reach out to me directly. A lot of them have, and I've worked it out. So they've got signed copies of my book in their hot little hands. Perfect for Christmas.
I agree with you. Go to therichbrown.com if you want to pick up a copy of On Violence and Varietals as well. And give the gift of American Warrior Society, because in 2025, the fight just may be coming, Dr. Fuller.
Be ready.